I'm just here to tell you a bit about my story, the actual one and not the Instagram version one. So I'm half Taiwanese, half Scottish. I grew up in Doha, Qatar in the Middle East. So from the very beginning, my life didn't really look like the average 4-year-old that you would see in Taiwan. I was a third culture kid, you know, I was growing up in a country where I'm not from, and I have two parents from two different countries. So I started playing tennis around 9 years old, a bit later than most of my friends who are playing professionally. But I did a lot of sports. I really loved sports till this day. Tennis was just the one where we started understanding that I was kind of getting good at. And kind of when that happens, naturally the question kind of comes like, okay, how far do you want to take this? I don't have a memory of where I was like, oh yeah, like I want to be a tennis player. It kind of just happened. So I moved to Spain when I was just 13 years old on my own. So going to Spain was the decision that my parents and I made. And Spain at the time, I mean, even now, it's, you know, you have great quality work there, great players, and yeah, that was basically the ultimate decision. So I packed my things, I got on the plane, and then I left. I didn't fully understand what I was getting myself into until I actually got there. As a 13-year-old, I thought that I understood, but I didn't. Like, I was literally moving away from my parents at 13 years old, just put into this pool of full independence. And obviously my mother prepared me a bit. But yeah, I trained every day, I got better, you know, I was being in an environment with some coaches who are working with the best players in the world or who has worked with the best players in the world. Everything was just driven. Everyone really wanted to achieve something in tennis. Till this day, I'm super grateful that I had that opportunity to be around those kind of people. But yeah, I had to grow up really fast. I mean, I had to be independent. I was living in an apartment sometimes with other girls, but I was always the youngest. I had to solve problems and solutions before I could even understand that I could ask for help. I, you know, learned to perform before understanding my emotions and feelings. The goal was everything, you know, the goal of being a tennis player, being a professional tennis player and training for that, that was everything. That was the reason why I was there. And then I moved back home with my family to Taiwan in 2019, just before COVID hit, and I was around 15, and that was kind of, I think, a big culture shock for me. I was not really prepared for what I was about to face in Taiwan. Most people think, oh, we're going home, you know, it must be comfort, it must fix some feelings, or, you know, being with family and stuff. Yeah, that did not really happen for me. Like, I never lived in Taiwan, so it was basically moving to a new country again. In Taiwan, it was really difficult for me. Culturally, it was completely different. The tennis culture is also quite different. Training environment is super different. And I just had big goals, big dreams, which was normal from my past environment. But then when I was put into this new environment in Taiwan, I didn't feel that people believed in the same size of a dream as I did. Yeah, so it was really difficult to adapt, and it really affected my mental health, and I cried every night, and that's just not, you know, not me asking for sympathy, but it was a reality. I was going to training and then I was coming home and crying in the corner of my room, and I remember that specific corner, and I felt really, really alone. By the way, this is no shame to Taiwan, the country itself. I love Taiwan. It was just my personal experience at that time of my life. I couldn't take it in 2021, so then I moved to Portugal alone. Again, I was around 16 or 17, I think, around that age. I moved to Portugal, to a really small city, so comparing to like Barcelona that I used to live in and then Kaohsiung in Taiwan, I think these two are quite city-like cities. I was the only international player. My tennis improved a lot, you know, obviously that was the reason why I was going there. I felt like I was putting in quality work. I learned the most when I was in Portugal in terms of tennis. But under all that, under that layer of just tennis, there's a big layer under that most people don't talk about as athletes. And especially I don't really talk about this under this tennis layer that I experienced. And I'm about to tell you a bit about that. So I had really no real friends the first 2 years I was in Portugal. Like I had colleagues, like I would go to training and I had a couple players, not many, it was like 2 or 3 or sometimes just one. And they were all Portuguese players that lived in that city. They have their families, they have their lives outside of tennis. They were still going to actual school. I was doing online school. But outside of that bubble of training, I was going home alone in my apartment. I didn't have a real friend in terms of like, hey, you want to hang out tonight? You want to go get some ice cream? Hey, do you want to hang out this weekend? Let's go to the beach. I couldn't even have like a full deep conversation because like there was that language barrier. So I always found myself in this situation where there was this layer or this wall that I just couldn't break through, and to the point where I kind of gave up in the end. Because of that, because I had no social life, I had no way to kind of just switch off. I think most people that know being an athlete, when you're putting, or even, anything that you're kind of working towards or a goal, like you need to have a switch off moment where you can just kind of, not think about tennis. And I didn't have that. I didn't have the space where I could just kind of be a person and not a tennis player. Looking back, I think it was something that was not good. Everything went into my training and I ignored it because tennis, like I was just so driven and so hardworking for this one goal that I wanted, which was to be a professional tennis player, that whatever else around me, like it was like, okay, whatever. Like my feelings, yeah, you can fuck off. My emotions, yeah, you can fuck off. Like stop thinking about that. No social life, yeah, it's fine, I need to rest anyways. Like everything I just kind of ignored, and that was also a problem, and I think it started to affect my mental health. I was not really aware that that was the reason that was affecting my mental health, and then my body started to, be connected with my mind, and I was facing a lot of injuries during those years. Because of those injuries, I sometimes, I was playing well and then I had to stop because I got injured. I never could play a full year without an injury. And it was really hard for me because I was training the right way. We were being careful with my training. Physically, in my opinion, I was a great athlete. So it was really, really difficult, and it's like the only thing that I was kind of ignoring was my mind. And looking back, I'm like, yeah, obviously it was your mind, that's why you were getting injured. But yeah, I hated getting injured, not one because I couldn't play, but two, I couldn't go on tournaments. And going on tournaments for me, it was like my way of having a social life, because all my friends, my international friends that I met in Spain or at tournaments, they were all playing the same tournaments as me. So going to tournaments, it means that I could see my friends. If I was injured, I would stay in the small city in Portugal, locked up in my room, training 1 or 2 hours a day, and then the rest of the day I'm doing nothing in my apartment alone. So in 2023, I then faced a massive injury, the biggest injury I've had in my career, which was a wrist injury. I had surgery on my left wrist, and it was something that just completely broke me, but also made me. I came back to Taiwan for this surgery, I forgot to mention. This injury and this surgery was really the breaking point for me, where I was just like, look, right now, if I come back from this surgery, it's all or it's nothing. I've never worked, I always work hard, but I've never worked as hard as I did coming back from the surgery. I was just fully in a moment where I wanted to change my mindset. I wanted to become better than I was before I stopped. And I wanted to prove to myself that even with injuries, I can still play great tennis afterwards and I can still come back stronger. And I just put my whole heart and my whole mind into this process, but also keeping in mind the things that were outside. I was giving myself to have some social life. It was all or nothing. It was blood, sweat, and tears, literally. It was all or nothing for this recovery. When I went back to Portugal for some competitions, I also understood that, I wanted to change my environment a little bit. I wanted something new, playing with better players than me, also having a bit of a social life as well. Like, I knew I had to change some things in the way that I used to work. Yeah, I was super motivated. I think it was the happiest time that I've ever had in my tennis career and in my life in general. I was playing better. I was just simply focused on my progress. Yeah, and then sooner or later, bang, I got slapped again. I had to face some financial difficulties, and I had to stop playing tennis forever. I haven't played for the last 2 years, and that really didn't break me. It completely destroyed me. It was literally like someone slammed the door right in your face, and I was knocked out. It was really difficult for me because I had this feeling of every single time that I give everything, every single time that I work hard, obviously for something that is not guaranteed, I just have it taken away from me all the time. Either it's injury or it's what I faced, which was a financial situation. The financial reality of professional tennis is something that athletes, tennis players, or in general, it's not talked about enough in the lower tier of professional tennis, and it's a reality that many players face, unfortunately, and many players are forced to stop playing or chasing their dream because of the financial situation and reality of professional tennis. And yeah, so that was in 2024. I stopped. I ultimately decided to come back home to Taiwan to live with my parents and start building my new life of whatever that was. And it was hard, you know. I had weeks and weeks where I just would not get out of bed. I was low-key depressed. I couldn't get out of bed. I was barely eating as well. It was really tough. My mom kind of said like, look, you gotta get up. You gotta get up because no one's gonna do it for you. And so I decided to go work at a restaurant. And funny enough, that really helped me and that put me back up on my feet. Working at that restaurant, it kind of gave me a purpose again. You know, obviously my dream is not to be a waitress, but it was something that got me up on my feet. You know, I had to show up. Great experience for me. It made me feel productive in my day. Sooner or later, you know, I started to understand like, okay, I'm mopping these floors after my shift, and like I'm not making any money and I want to be financially independent. I started to gain some motivation back, and I started my coaching career, and I started to build something of my own, you know, but obviously part of my heart, you know, I haven't had that spark back yet of the spark that I had when I played tennis. Nothing compares to being a tennis player and working for that dream that, you know, I do hope that I can go back one day. It's the one thing that makes me the happiest in the world, despite everything that I faced, which was injuries, or it was setbacks, or it was mental health difficulties, or training, anything. Like, I wouldn't change anything. But I have to be honest, I feel that I am a bit scared to try again, because every time that I put all my effort and I put everything that I had in something, it was taken away from me. I'm not gonna like paint rainbows and sunshines here for you guys and say that, yeah, everything works out, because honestly, I don't know if everything's gonna work out, and that's just a part of life. I think everything is just, you don't know. Nothing is guaranteed to you in life, you know? But hey, like, I'm 21, I'm just figuring out life, just like anybody else in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s. But I'm here and I'm going to keep showing up. I'm making this because when I was going through some of the hardest moments that I've had in my very short life, I wish I had someone that I could turn to that would speak about the process in all honesty, you know, and I couldn't find that. I'm not here to inspire you. I'm not here to give you a sub story. I'm not here to tell you like, look, everything's gonna be great, and you know, I just want to be honest of what it actually looks like. If you're carrying something with weight right now, or you have lost a bit of yourself, or you have a dream and you're afraid of trying again, anything that you feel, I think you should just keep going. That's what I tried to tell myself. You never know when you're going to just make that step through the door that keeps slamming you in the face. You know, maybe there is another door next to it that will also slam you in the face. Maybe there's another door, and you never know which door is the one that you're kind of just gonna be able to put your step through. Even when you're not sure that it's working or if it's gonna work out, like, I think that's what really counts, is just to keep showing up and keep trying. I think that's what really counts. That's That's the whole thing, really.